a few that were both sick and haven't turned up yet, so we'll see if they front up or not. We are going to record this tonight, so we thought this might be a good resource for later on, even when we're not physically here necessarily. It might be able to get used for something else. So welcome to tonight. We call it Love and Marriage, and it'll be broken into two sections, an hour, a break, and then another hour. Okay, so hang in there, try and stay focused for that time. We'll try and make it light enough and engaging enough to keep your attention. We've been doing marriage stuff now for 18 years. We went to the States in 2003, did some training to facilitate marriage ministry, and we had a passion in our heart and a desire to do something about that. And so we, in the early days of the church, we decided to make that commitment and go to the States and do some training. What we brought back didn't actually work in the Australian culture, so we had to reform it, and over the next year or so we rewrote what we call now Fall in Love, Stay in Love, which is a small group format. Now we've concentrated what we do in Fall in Love, Stay in Love, and also our marriage retreat into 2 hours, which would normally take probably about 12 hours. So we're not going to be able to give you all the information, right? So we're not even going to try to, so don't freak out. But we will try and give you the main concepts of our marriage ministry stuff, just so that you, if you're interested, you can buy the book, you can do your own reading. There's a way we can facilitate that between couples. And now I will say marriage is a lot tonight, even though not everyone in the room is married. If you're committed in a relationship, we sort of call that a marriage anyway, so don't get put off if I keep using marriage, just so I don't have to use the two terminologies all the time. So this is only the second time we've done the 2-hour format. First time it was really successful, and so I'm hoping it works for you tonight as well.
I just want to throw in there, we've been married for 42 years.
And not that qualifies you to do this, by the way.
That's a really long time though, isn't it? We were only 20 years old when we got married. And have learned a lot over the years. So a lot of that's been, you'll hear a bit about us, how we have fine-tuned our own marriage through this material too.
Yep, so there are we're going to use probably about 4 concepts we're going to show you. So we will do a little bit of an exercise after the first session, and then also one after the second session, just to help hopefully concrete in those thoughts that we've got there. So the first thought I want to give you, and if you're in church the day we did our relationship morning, is about the love bank. And it's one of those interesting... I think, have we got the slide around the right way for this, Gareth? We might actually do... Yeah, look, here I'll start here. There's 4 commitments of marriage that we talk about in this grouping thing. There's to care, protect, be honest, and the time we give to our partners. They're all based about that, around the commitments we make in a relationship, in a marriage, for instance. And so we're going to refer to those a little bit through the night, but I'll just be on the screen. I won't refer them necessarily verbally. But that's how we put together our retreat that we do with those 4 areas, because we think they're really important and what the commitment we make to each other. The first thing I will start actually is in the next slide is 3 states of mind of marriage. And basically, yes, there it is. So at the moment, between any couple in this room, they'll either be in intimacy, in conflict, or withdrawal. Now, hopefully, because you're here tonight and you have turned up and it didn't look like there's too many fights going on, that you'll be either in intimacy or you might be working some stuff out. You might be in a little bit of conflict. But what we found in marriage couples particularly, it's so easy to slip into withdrawal when things aren't going right. You either withdraw physically or emotionally, you pull back, you distance yourself from your partner just because things aren't going the right way. And our job tonight is to show you how important it is to move from withdrawal through conflict to intimacy. Now, all the blokes straight away when I talk about intimacy, I'm thinking about sex straight away. I'm not necessarily talking about sex, right, when I'm talking about intimacy, but there's a point where a couple is intimacy is in intimacy because there's just an ease between the communication, between the way they relate together. And so what we want to say to you is conflict is good. I know it doesn't feel good, but it's actually good if you are in withdrawal to go through that conflict to move into intimacy. And the truth of it is you can slip between those three stages in an hour. You know, you can be withdrawn and go, I'm not talking to him or her, and then there'll be conflict, there'll be rubbing, you know, like, oh gosh, he's a rat bag, or why is she doing that? And then, oh, I do love her after all. And it's like you can slip between those stages, but it's important to recognise those stages so you can actually proactively start to go, okay, what's going on? Why am I so angsty about this? Let's work it out and get back to intimacy, because that's the goal, really.
Even just being aware that those three stages exist is really good. But if you find yourself camped in that withdrawal state, you're in trouble, because that's when you're just totally disconnected from one another. And you might be there momentarily, but as Greg said, you can just get easily back. But if you camp there, your relationship is in trouble. It's very difficult to get back from there, isn't it?
It is. So that's the three states of mind of marriage. That's about all I'll talk to that tonight about. It's just important to recognise that for your relationship, because if you are in withdrawal or you're in constant conflict, you need to work out a way to unlock that and move into intimacy. Now, in the life we live, conflict's a natural part of what we do. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be, proactive discussions about things, and it depends on your personality type, depends how assertive you'll be in those discussions. But it's actually working out how we negotiate through that conflict back into intimacy. The other concept we want to deal with quickly before we jump into the meat we want to use is the love bank, and so I think we showed this on the day we preached. This is a concept whereby every one of us has got a love bank inside us. And so when we relate with people who put in positive things into our life, we feel we like them, right? And so that's our instincts, I guess. We like being around people that we feel good about when we're with them, right? Whereas the opposite is also true. If there's someone in your life that when you're around them, it's a negative thing in your life, well, that's the opposite. You don't really want to be around them. You dislike them. And so the same applies for love that we're talking about. If someone puts enough, meets our emotional needs or puts enough into our love bank, we'll actually grow to like them a lot. And eventually there's a threshold that breaks through that you actually start to love them. And that's why this is so important to know this for our marriages, so that it impacts your day-to-day life, and know that, I can't allow someone from the opposite sex to be constantly meeting my needs, because you're going to grow fond of them. And in fact, that's where affairs start. And so basically it's important to recognise this thing, understand the love bank is inside all of us, and anyone can have a love bank account in us, also as a negative love bank account as well. So
And this works for anybody in your family, whether it's your children or your parents or anybody. When they do something that really meets your need, you can feel it, filling up all the time. But the romantic love, you want to be filled by your partner, by the one closest to you, not by somebody you work with or your best girlfriend or something like that, don't you? So this is what we're going to be talking a bit about, the emotional needs, what they look like. We're going to explain them a little bit to you, and then we'll send you off to maybe have a little think about what yours might be.
Okay, so we have 10 emotional needs that it's been shown statistically that cover the majority of emotional needs. Now, there might be some in there that you wouldn't understand why they're there, and there's others you would think, well, why isn't that one there? That's, we can probably categorise them somewhere in that process. But there's 10 emotional needs. In general, 5 are more likely to be male chosen, and 5 are more likely to be female chosen. Now, we're not going to try and tell you which ones are which. Now, what I want you to do is, while we're going through these, because we're going to explain what they are to you tonight, what we want you to do is actually try and think of, is this an emotional need for me? And is this emotional need for my partner? So as we explain these 10 emotional needs, I'd like you to start to think about that, because that's pretty much the foundation of what we're going to ask you to do in a minute. So, so Robin, do you want to kick off with that?
Okay, so the first one we talk about is affection. Now you might go, that's a no-brainer, you know, I know what affection is all about. But affection actually does communicate that I really care for you. Now we all have different needs, and some of us love affection, some not so much. So have a think about whether you're the sort of person that loves physical hugs. That's one way of showing affection. Holding hands is another nice way to do it. But some people actually like lovely cards. Like, you know, you might give your partner a lovely card that says all lovely sentimental things on it. What other kinds of affection are there? Flowers, things like gifts and that sort of thing's really showing affection as well. Back rubs, head rubs. Greg loves a nice head rub, don't you?
Robin likes her feet rubbed.
Yeah,
So,
There's a few hugs. So, and it's very important that you'll know this one if this is if this is one of your emotional needs. That when your husband or spouse is being affectionate with you, it makes you really feel loved. And if he's never affectionate, he or she is never affectionate, well, it really starts you feel that real. I'm really missing something. Okay, so that's how you kind of detect whether that's for you or not. Okay, so that's affection.
I can give you an example of this, and this is beyond couples relationships, because I can remember a time as a child that I was in a shop. Actually, the shopkeeper was known to, my mum was with me. I was just probably 10 years old or something like that, and I remember her having her hand on my head and just rubbing my head, but telling this person how well I'd done at school or sport. I can't even remember what actually she was praising me about. It was the most loved I'd ever felt in my life. So the two things that I find emotional needs is affection and admiration. And she was doing both those things at that point. She didn't know she was doing that, obviously, but I recognised that I felt the most loved. It's one of those points in my mind that I really can refer back to and go, wow, I felt so loved then. And so it's interesting. So affection's the one there. Next one I'm going to talk about sexual fulfillment. And now remember, this is exclusive for our partners, right? So when we commit to our partner, it's an exclusive emotional need. You know, there's no other ethical choices where to get this need met, right? You understand that? In most marriages, one spouse, you know, it seems to be mostly the men, but not always. We've had many women that have had a great need for this. One of them has a greater need than the other, usually in a relationship, put it that way. And sometimes this can create a fair bit of conflict in the relationship. But we've got to be careful we don't misunderstand the need for affection and this confused with this sexual fulfillment one. You know, affection is really pretty much about the physical love without the sexual connotation, right? There's no, so it's one of those things that's not connected to sex. You don't give her a hug so I might just get a bit of sex later on, you know, and it's not, I'll rub your feet, then we'll have sex. It's like, no, it's appropriate, but, you know, it's about non-sexual affection we're talking about. Whereas if we tend to feel happy and contented when we make love, and you feel frustrated when you're not making love, it's very likely that sexual fulfillment is one of your emotional needs. Now, there's 4 intimate emotional needs we're going to talk about. So we've covered 2 of them already, and there's another 2 we'll talk about. So Robin, you want to do the next one? Yeah, intimate conversation.
Intimate conversation. Yes, this is having a chat. But it's more than just talking. Conversation's more than just talking to your partner, okay? It's actually sharing very much about who you are and what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And a lot of people really, really want that conversation. It's okay just to talk about the weather and stuff like that, but it's much more than that. It's actually sharing of yourself in a conversation. And if that's one of your highest needs, it's really, really important that your partner is the one that meets that need, because this is one that's very, very easy to be met by someone else. For example, if this is one of your highest needs, that really close connection through conversation, and you work with somebody who's a great talker, yet your partner at home isn't really much into conversation, what happens is innately you're chatting away and the deposits are being made into your love bank through that really deep conversation that you're having. And can you see how that instantly kind of works? This person here is the one depositing the units, and when you get home and maybe your partner's just not talking to you the way you should, you're suddenly feeling love or towards another person. And, it might be just not even planned by any means whatsoever, but it can just happen. So it's just really important, if this is one of your needs, to actually learn how to connect and talk to one another. That's right. And just allowing each other to, be able to speak and converse and hear one another. That's about it, I think. Yep.
Okay. Another one that's pretty interesting is recreational companionship. Now, before we were married, very often we often planned our dates around what we were doing. So Robin would come to soccer because I played soccer, so she'd sit in the car and I thought she was watching me play soccer. I'd find out later she was actually just doing study and work for uni and that sort of stuff. But
I'd look up every now and then and see a goal scored or something.
Did you see me score that goal? No. Oh, okay. Did you see that? No. Okay. So very often there was a lot of commonality, we thought, about things we did together as a couple before we got married. Now, the problem is sometimes we get married, go, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. I'm not going to go with you to soccer. I'm not going to go to whatever Robin was interested in doing, like as almost like, oh, no, I'm with you all the time. I don't need to be within that place as well. And the problem is that we can grow apart, because particularly for some people, they need that sense of recreational companionship. Being together and doing things together builds that sense of romantic love in our lives, because it feeds into our love bank and produces an emotional need, a deposit into our love bank. And so we feel closer. For instance, when we do things together, when we go on an adventure together, when we go caravanning or camping or whatever, there's just something nice about being out in the bush together, and it's just that time together is a really important thing. So it's difficult to find sometimes things that have got commonalities for both of us, but that's just one of those things we have to work at. And, the blokes are going to do the bloke thing and the girls are going to do the girl thing. Well, there's an opportunity to do that together as a couple every now and then too. It doesn't have to be exclusive. I'm not saying that in any way. Just important that you work out something that you enjoy doing together and doing as much as you can, because it actually will meet those emotional needs that you've got, particularly if you've got that recreational companionship as one of your emotional needs. So I think that's all I need to say on that. Yep.
Another one is openness and honesty. This goes on a little bit more after that conversation I was talking about. Some people have a need for absolute honesty. I mean, we all have a need for honesty, but some people have a real high need to know everything what their partner is thinking and feeling and withholding nothing back. Some people might not even bother them at all, but if they feel that there's things being held back from them, they just don't feel secure and don't feel that the trust is there. So it's like being an open book with one another, withholding nothing. You might be thinking, oh, they don't need to know about that, I'm just working on this. But some people, and this maybe you, need to be told all of the information. I found out at one stage I had quite a high emotional need for that. I felt like Greg was holding back stuff. I just thought there's stuff going on and I don't know what it is, and then you start going down that track of, oh, have I done something wrong and whatever. But he felt he was protecting me by trying to work things through in his head first, and then he was going to tell me down the track. But I would rather have known what's going on. Just tell me as you're processing. And I felt more included. I didn't feel excluded from anything he was thinking. That was pretty right, wasn't it? So that's openness and honesty.
Yep. So, and that was an interesting one because I thought I was protecting Robin by holding things back so she wasn't getting all that information and trying to process it. But when I realised that she felt alienated because I wasn't sharing all that stuff with her, it was like, oh gosh, I can tell you everything. That's fine. I just didn't think it was fair and to lob all that on you. And so it was actually a whole different deal when I just went, oh, okay, here it is. And it was exactly what she wanted. I think in the end she said, no, you don't have to tell me everything. Stop telling me stuff. I don't want to know more. So, because there are things, that you just carry. This next one's an interesting one. It's physical attractiveness. Now, this is a tough one because very often we are firstly drawn to our spouse, to our partner, because they attracted us physically. Like that's often the only thing you know about them. You see them somewhere and go, oh, she's a bit all right. And Robin, the dancer I first took notice of, she had some velvet hot pants and some white leather boots. And
it was the
like,
70s.
It was the 70s.
It was the
and
70s.
It was like, she looks all right. I'll see if I can get the last dance with her tonight. And so it was that sort of thing that attracted me in that first instance. And so it's important not to judge this as a superficial emotional need because, it's one of those things that it started the relationship. So it's important that if it's important to one of the partners, that both of them try to do the best they can to keep that physical attractiveness. Now, it's not being shallow. It's not being superficial. It's just like, no, it's good to look after yourself. It's good to wear nice clothes. It's good to keep your hair in nice condition or trimmed or whatever. It's just whatever that might look like. And so hygiene, for instance, personal hygiene, just wear some deodorant, and it'll be fine. So, and attractiveness is in the eyes of the beholder. So it's actually not what the world would tell us necessarily. It'd be what I would ask, Robin, for instance, if I really like it when you wear that dress or that, I don't know, whatever, and that outfit or whatever. So it's just one of those things that we can't disregard it because it is an emotional need for some people. It's generally not the number one. Like probably the first four are probably generally in the top couple for most people. But this one's also an important one. So you can't just disregard it because it seems superficial. I'm not going to worry about that. Well, if it's a need of your partner, well, maybe you need to start thinking about it and addressing that particular need. So.
Another one is financial support. A lot of people marry and they expect that they will be catered for financially by their partner, and that's often the case. And sometimes that need doesn't, that emotional need doesn't often arise until maybe circumstances change, and someone loses a job and there's no finances anywhere, and all of a sudden, you just feel like you're drowning. And often when a family starts, children arrive and the pressure starts on finances, this is a need that can start to arise then. So I suppose it's one of those things that's a bit tricky to know if there's finances always around. You may not even know it's a real need. It would only show its head, I think, if finances started to come right down and it really, really started to be a problem in your relationship with that one, wouldn't it? Never seen anybody have that as a real high need. Those first couple we talked about are often right at the top, and these are the ones that just come down the ladder a little bit, don't they?
Okay, so this next one's an interesting one as well. Domestic support, and this one's a bit of a time bomb because at first it seems irrelevant and this is primitive talking about this. For many couples, this becomes really evident after a few years of being married, and it surprises both spouses when it catches them out, because it includes having some harmony in the home, that meals might be cooked, that the washing is done, that it's not all over the house and every corner of the house, that things are in some order, and that I guess the kids are looked after. Those sorts of things, and if you've got this need, you'll feel very fulfilled when the house is in some order. You feel, oh, this is nice. This feels good. There's not chaos going on. Some people couldn't care less about this. It's like the last thing they think about. But here's the thing: it's almost not what I do. But if my partner has that emotional need, I've got to consider how I can contribute to help that meet that need. And so it becomes complicated if both couples, both partners are working full time, or there's kids in the loop as well, and there's a need for income, and there's a need to keep the house in some order, and it's just tricky sometimes to get the balance right in that space. So it's a real thing, and it can bring a great sense of, which is weird, isn't it? But love, when that thing's cared for and done well in the household, and you go, oh, I feel really loved when that's happening. And so it's just one of those things that you need to be aware that people are wired this way, and your spouse may be wired this way. So you need to make sure you consider that in the process. So.
And this one's a little bit like that. It's called family commitment. It's more for those that have got children, or I suppose if you didn't have children, maybe there's parents or something that you're looking after, elderly parents or something like that. You could always think of it like that. Now, it's not babysitting the kids or just childcare. It's actually partnering up and looking after the children's moral well-being, their whole bringing up of the kids, helping you with that. Often, maybe, it might be, that's just the woman's job, she's raising the kids or whatever. But if you have a need for family commitment, you want your other half in there with you, raising those kids, making those decisions, training the kids, and coming to an agreement how you're going to do that. Because there's nothing worse than if it's a high need for you, and say if it's a very high need for me, and I've got a bit of an idea where I want the kids to be, and my partner is totally doing something absolutely crazy, totally different to me, that's not going to do anything to deposit those love units. It's actually going to start detracting from it. So can you see? It might sound a bit trivial, but it can be very important if that's something that really sits with you as a need. So that's helping raise the family or care for your family together. Help doing that.
Yep. And the last one I've got here is admiration. If you have a need for admiration, often you'll fall in love with your spouse because they would compliment you. And all of a sudden they're not complimenting you anymore. It only feels like there's criticism coming, for instance. And so if we can just get an understanding that here's the interesting thing with this admiration one. And I can give you a personal example of this. For me, it is one of my top 5. And so, and please take this the right way, I could care less if you like my preaching or not, but if Robin says something, either critical or positive, that really affects me. So I don't like anyone if they, like it when someone says, oh, didn't enjoy that today, what was going on with you? And it's like, oh, it is what it is. But if Robin says something, I go, oh gosh, I must have really missed the mark, or that was good. She says, that was great. And you go, oh, really? Oh, that's good. So it's interesting that admiration thing is in me, and so, I take notice of what my wife says, and she can, and it's such an easy one to fix just by complimenting our spouse. And so it's not a difficult thing to do at all. In fact, it's probably the easiest one out of all of them to meet that need, just by going, oh yeah, you did good, that was good. And that's all you really need is a pat on the back. So.
And I think if that is one of your highest needs, the admiration, sometimes the criticism really cuts deep, because that's quite the opposite, to a compliment. The criticism just makes those really deep cuts.
It does.
Yes.
It does. So that's pretty much, we've unpacked the 10 emotional needs, right? So I hope something spoke to you in the process of this. Now, what we'd like you to do now is, we're on track. That's great. We want to know how well you know your partner, I guess, first of all. So I want to break into couples. Can you read that? So we would normally talk about 5 emotional needs. But what we've done tonight, just to make it easier, is to try for you to identify 2 emotional needs, your 2 highest emotional needs, both in your partner, first of all, and then in yourself. So I want you to think about that, and we'll leave that list up on the screen so you can keep referring to it. Is that what it says up there? Well, what do you think your partner's top 2 emotional needs are? So have a go at it. Try and work out what you think they are, and then have a think about what you think your 2 highest emotional needs are. Think about it first, and then I want you to discuss those. I want you to say, well, I think your highest emotional need is whatever, admiration. Oh, no, it's not even on my list. Well, why? And just have a discussion about that and see if you can identify in the next 10 minutes, just take a few minutes with this, just to work out what your emotional needs are. And if you've got time, you can go more than 2. You can go to the 5, because generally the 5 are what we normally talk about, but the top 2 are probably the most important ones. So does that make sense? Can you do that? So if you want to spread out, so if you don't want other people listening to your conversation, or if you're happy to stay where you are,
so a bit of explaining. Just when you're just chatting, just have a think. Okay, say if it's affection, you might go, yeah, I think mine's affection. Well, then you go, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does affection mean to you? Do you want lots of hugs? Do you want me kissing you? Do you want me holding your hand? What do you want me to do? This is your partner. Because you've got to identify it in you, and then be able to tell your partner what you need. Sometimes if we don't know what we need, we can't go crook on them if they don't do that. You know what that means? So this is your chance to have a real think about, what is it? What is it do I want? What makes me feel loved when my partner does something for me from up there?
Yep. So see, we've thrown a fair bit at you quickly, but what we're trying to do is get a quick take up on this. And if you to go, I think it is affection, but what does affection mean to me? Like, what is it that I feel love when Robin does that for me? I feel really close to her when she does that. If it's affection. If it's not affection, well, what is it then? What's the thing makes you feel closer and more loved in that relationship? So does that make sense? All right. If you want to spread out, there's plenty of space here. If you want to
move
just
somewhere where you've got some
space,
privacy, just the 2 of you, and have a little chat. We'll leave that up there.
Leave that up on the screen, and you can keep referring to it.
And see if you can come up with 2. And then what that would look like, how you're going to do that for one another.
So, were you able to articulate what made you feel loved? Were you able to get to that and explain it to your partner? Yes? Put up your hand if you sort of got there. No, not all everybody. Okay, sort of. Okay. This is a really important part of this, that you need to know what makes you feel loved so that your partner can meet that need. Does that make sense? Because if you can't work out what makes you feel loved, what chance has your partner got? Like you're shooting blanks into the night, and just going, I don't know if this is going to hit or not. But so what you've got to do is try and work out what makes you feel loved. And that's why I would suggest if this is new to you, I would suggest that you could buy the book over there. It's $25. I know it's a cost, but it'll give you everything in there to help you identify what that emotional need is for you, because there's some other things we're going to talk about in a minute that are love bank withdrawals that are really, really important to deal with. And but this one, you need to work out what makes you feel loved, so then you can communicate it and articulate it to your partner so they can actually do that, so you can actually start to build that love bank deposits and start to make some ground in that situation. So,
and, if you're having trouble, one way of maybe working it out is imagine if everything but that one thing was pulled away. Like if you were just left with affection and nothing else, would that do it for you? or if everything else was pulled
Or
away.
you could never have that.
Or never have that, yeah.
You know, if it was withdrawn, you could never have that again. How would that make you feel? So it's like just trying to articulate that in a way that brings clarity and preciseness to our language so it can help our partner understand what we need to feel loved. So,
And it makes a huge difference. It mightn't sound like it does, but it actually does. Once you realise what it is you need and then articulate that, and your partner makes effort to do that, it's amazing how what a difference it makes. Because often couples come to us and they're in trouble, and they just go, oh, I just don't even love my partner anymore. I think they've totally lost touch with one another of what they actually need from each other. So this is a really good opportunity for you to just nut that through a little bit, isn't it?
So here's the thing, just a sobering thought before we have a supper. We have couples that will come to us that can't even remember being in love. Their love bank is so depleted, so in the red, they can't even remember why they fell in love in the first place. And in fact, they'll have language like, we were never in love. And you go, yes, you were. You wouldn't have got married if you weren't in love. It's just that you can't remember what that feels like anymore, what that looks like, what that sounds like, what it feels like. And so it's actually starting to get back in contact with those initial things that drew us to our partner, that we were doing for each other in the early days, that made us feel loved, and getting back in contact with those. So we start to have those emotional need love bank deposits going into our love bank, and we start to build that sense of love for our partner again. So again, love is a verb, it's an action. It's actually a doing word. And it's a little bit like Christ, you know, he had to lay down his life. Well, sometimes we've got to lay down our life for our partner, but it's a dual, it's both sides. There's not one way or the other. It's actually both sides. When we meet each other's needs, we actually have a greater sense of love and appreciation for our partner. And we actually have a much stronger relationship, and we model that to our kids as well in a far more, it communicates it so much more to our kids because we're prepared to do what it takes to meet the needs of our partners. So,
and when your love bank's full, you often find that it's much easier to then reciprocate and love upon your partner. But when you're absolutely bankrupt, it's hard to sometimes do that. So it's kind of a bit of a win-win, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a difficult thing to do. We know that. We know it's a short time frame to get your head around it. But that's a really important thing to do, to work out what makes you feel loved from your partner, from your spouse, and then articulate it in a way that they can start to do that, to start to put emotional needs deposits into your love bank to start to make that feeling of love even more evident in your life. So, all right, we'll show you a bit more after the break, but have a break, have a coffee and tea, go to the loo, whatever you need to do, walk around, stretch, and we'll meet again in probably 15 minutes, I guess.